How are you, everybody? Good morning, good afternoon. I am broadcasting live from Miami. This is Carolina Chavez, if you still don't know me. Today is Wednesday, June 17th of 2020. Okay, so I think we're all familiar by now with all what's going on in terms of the protest and the Black Lives Matter movement. This has become global movement, a global event, and I believe that if we don't belong to the Black community, the African American or the African community, our job is to learn what we can do to make things better, to be more sensible and understand much better. What we can do is to learn. So in my search about this topic, I came across an article where Dominique Drakeford is speaking about sustainability and how clothes are so political and have been political throughout the whole civil rights movement. And she wrote, and I quote, "It's imperative to understand that the birth of public policy was created to keep Black people inferior. And this creates a landscape for how clothing became political. Believe it or not, this is the foundation of the global fashion industry, and it's political as F word." Okay, so I'm gonna explain to you a couple of things that I read from a book, and throughout all of this research, I strongly recommend you read this book. It's called I'll remember in a second, but I'm gonna describe a few details so we understand everything. Okay, we're gonna start with the hair, how the hair has been so significant and is so significant for the African and the African American community. When the sellers of slaves got their slaves, they would shave their hair, especially women, because they would argue it was healthier and germs and all these things. But really what they were doing is that they were stripping them away from their lifeline. Okay, they would identify each other through their styles of hair. They would make connections with other people. If these slaves were in other countries, they would find, or they could find people from their same regions through their hair. And when they were shaved, the sellers would strip all of this from them. They would take their language away, and they were just unable to identify other people that belong to the same regions or communities. So this was a very dehumanizing way for for the slaves, right? Just the fact that they would take the liberty to shave their heads was completely dehumanizing. And as time passed, we will see how they could. The way they used their hair was to also signal some social mobility. All right, so the hair is one extremely important aspect in this whole civil rights movement, and I'm going to explain soon. Denim, it's also, the story of denim is directly related to slaves, because at that time that was the clothes that they used, because it was durable, because it was cheap. So because of the durability of it, they could work for, the sellers didn't need to buy clothes for the slaves too often, so they would use denim. And we know that Levi Strauss founded the company around 1800s, and he was selling all these clothes to the sellers. So denim, as we know it now, is directly related. The history of denim cannot be told without making a direct reference to slaves, because at that time they only slaves used it. It was just unthinkable that any other person that was not a slave would use it, because this was the clothes for slaves. It was they were even called, denim was even called the black cloth or the slave cloth. So also the color, the indigo color of the denim, comes from a plant that has its origins in Africa. So when slaves came to this continent with their clothes this color, it became so valuable, the plant, that even before cotton and sugar, it became almost like a currency, because it was so valuable. And that also relates, the color, the indigo color that we know, directly goes back to that era of slavery. So the diaspora, which is what brought all the Africans to the American continent, happened around the 16th century and the 19th century. And this is the movement of slaves, right, that were brought to different countries in Latin America, in America. For example, Brazil got a population of 55.9 million black people. The United States, 46.4 million. Haiti, 10 million. Dominican Republic, 9.2 million. And Colombia, 4.9 million. So that's why we see so much influence from the African continent in all of these other countries in this side of the world. So since then, fashion and beauty has become a political symbol for identity, liberation, and freedom. Under colonialism and slavery, the hair was stripped from them, and after a few years, around the 1960s, it was unthinkable for women to wear their hairs natural, because it would relate them to slavery, and they wanted to get out of that. They wanted to forget. They wanted to, to live a different life. So it meant social mobility to have their hairs straightened or to have wigs. It was extremely popular, the wigs at that time. And it was just unthinkable for a woman to go out with her hair natural. Can you imagine? Then I'm going to speak about some elements, and then we're going to put them together, okay? So the denim, the hair, and then the soul style. The soul came from the word soul, which is complicated to define what really is. It's complicated to put in words what the soul means, right? So the African American and the African community started expressing their souls through elements like food, clothes, music, art, and that became the soul style in that era around the 1960s. So because they came from various regions in Africa, but all of them were different. We tend to put into one same context what Africa means, and really isn't, right? It's so vast and so rich that that's how, through the soul style, that's how this community expressed where they came from, their different colors, the different foods, the different traditions, the different stories, etc. So the soul provided a language through which people of African descent could speak about the horrors of slavery and colonialism, and also serve, through the same language, also served as a source for cultural and pride and political solidarity. So around the 1960s, some political artists, I think we're familiar with some of them, jazz artists, blues artists, starting expressing through their art, through their music, like Nina Simone, Abbey Lincoln, Miriam Makeba, and they became models of this soul style by the way they were dressing and by their hair, okay? Remember, it meant social mobility. It meant you were educated, you belonged to a certain status the hair, only the hair, okay? You belong to a certain status, and it was even controversial, unthinkable, to even think of going out your own home or let other people see you without, with your hair done. So during this time of expression, it was more on the artistic side, right? But then it came this expression, political expression, with its own perils. It says that at a concert at Miles College in Birmingham in August of 1963, white segregationists threatened to kill Nina Simone and the other artists that were going to go to the stage. So she believed she was under heavy surveillance from the CIA, and to the point where agents came to a school, to Juilliard school, to ask if she was a threat to national security. I mean, unbelievable. She was singing protests and political matters and things like that, which was the only way for them to, at that time, for them to express and to maybe educate people of what they went through, no? And she was treated like a criminal. She was sort of a national a threat to national security. All of this happened in Greenwich Village in New York around the 60s, because this place was the home of the counterculture movement. In this area, many bars played their music, which was not a common thing anywhere, no, to have black people going into bars and restaurants and art places like theaters or exhibits, so they concentrated there. And after some time, they were able to go up on the society. They got money, they have money, they earn money through their art, and were able to buy penthouses and live a very accommodated life in general. And their style, the way they dressed, their hair and everything, became iconic for the movement, okay? So when the attention starts to go to the South in the United States, women and men were also protesting in the streets, but very, very well dressed, right? With their hairs done, suits, hats for the men, and the women with her shirts and skirts, long skirts, with shoes with medium pumps, but very, very well dressed, because it meant they were educated and they knew what they were doing. But what happens, this is a younger generation, many of them college students. What happened, and it became more radical, the movement, right? It was not anymore, or not only through music and art, but it became more radical. So with the radical became the police brutality. So they started hosing them down. And of course, for the women, it was so dehumanizing, not only for the fact that they were physically aggravated, but also because the water would destroy their hair, and they were, like exposed out there with their hair all messed up. Obviously the clothes, but the hair was like, they just couldn't. So there are stories that at one point the police grabbed a bunch of women and put them in a car, in a truck. They turned on the heat, and they would start sweating. The hair, of course, got all messed up. The clothes, they sweat so much, the clothes became almost transparent, so they could see their bodies, they could see their underwear, and they, at that time, they couldn't search them because they were for some reason protected. But I mean, if they couldn't see a real threat, they couldn't search them. But when they made them get wet with all this sweat in these trucks, they literally they were completely wet, their clothes transparent, and then they could see what they had underneath. which in most of the cases were flyers. They would use, these women would give flyers away. So it was not only an aggravation, to physically remove them from the protests, but also in their most inner, aspects of pride, right? There's also stories about groups of students sitting in cafeterias or places, to reclaim their space, because many spaces were only designated for black people, for white people. So they would do these sittings, and there's this story about a girl that was dragged out of one of these places. She lost her shoes, her hair was a mess. She dragged her out by her hair, and they poured ketchup and mustard and sugar. So all of her clothes and her hair was a complete mess. They would arrest the protesters, and they would spend in jail 30 days or and a long period of time, and of course again the hair. So when all of this happened, they started transforming into a new image that would bring them the same empowerment, but also the convenience, right? So they started wearing their hair short. This also comes from the singers, the political singers, because they dared to wear their hair short the natural way. So in this protest in the South, they started to adopt this. And also denim, which nobody ever dared to use denim, the black community, because it related, the connection was direct to slavery, and that was the fight, that was the struggle that they wanted to be as away as possible of those times. So, but for this protest for them to be more comfortable and practical, and like also take away means for the police to humiliate them, they started wearing their hair short, denim. Some women would wear long skirts, some overalls. The overalls were very popular among slaves because they could put their tools, and now they started wearing overalls because they could put their flyers and things like that, and the police wouldn't find out, right? So at that same time, the beauty parlors were crucial for them, because they became a place for them to regroup, for them to, of course, take care of themselves and get their hairs done, but also as meeting places for all of these women. At that time, many of the things they could do to organize had to be underground, because they were under surveillance, or it was not acceptable. So they would gather at the beauty parlors, and they became part also of this movement. At this same time, also in colleges, a magazine called Essence started to circulate, and what the magazine portrayed was the natural look, which is the hair short. And they also started teaching the students how to use thrift stores. They were promoting a lot of this, also how to mend their clothes, how to do their own clothes. So what they would do is mend the clothes or buy some cheaper fabric, and they would complement with some African elements, and they would wear beautiful things, but a very, very low price, because they could use second hand or they could do it themselves. So that's one of the very important things Essence magazine did. And also what's important in this era is the Grandasa models, which became part of all this movement, and what they promoted was the natural look. So I'm going to show you some pictures. They would be featured on album covers, the models, with their bigger figures, like being proud of what they had, no? Because at that time the European model of beauty was skinny women, very fine, you know, faces and the nose and the hair all in place, and so they wanted to break away from that. They wanted to bring the pride back and the beauty of the black community, and also help college students to feel brave about using their hair, because just years before was unacceptable. It was something that even families couldn't tolerate. Some women did this hiding from their families because they just didn't. They thought it was for poor people, for ignorance, for, you know, so powerful. You know, the fact that they can wear the hair this way or the other, it was just so powerful. So one of the it became from different a couple of different places. These activist singers started wearing the hair like that. They became fashion icons. So women that were that admired them and wanted to follow on the steps started to be a little bit more brave in using the hair like that. And also what the Essence magazine and the Grandasa models message, you know, it was about this too. After a few years, around the 1970s, the Afro became popular. It's not very clear where or who it came from, but the Afro is basically the same natural hair, but bigger. It's like a halo, right? So this is also part of the soul style, and a very important part of their identity too, because not everybody can wear an afro like that because of their type of hair. So the bigger the afro, the more African people are, and the more pride. You know, the bigger, the more pride, and the, you know, more. It became symbolic of one's black consciousness. So. One of the activist singers that became an icon is Odetta, which was also a civil and human rights activist, often referred to as the voice of the civil rights movement. She also started wearing kaftans, which are they were made to not to cover like in a hiding way, but to accommodate the shape of accommodate and accentuate the larger features of a black woman. You know, they're taller and their buttocks are bigger, and you know, so they were designed for this. It was part of her style, and she also became an icon for that, not only because of her singing and her political activism, but also because of her clothes. So at one point she said, this is so, I don't know if it's painful, it is, and just shocking to me sometimes. She said, I do know there were many times I embarrassed, especially African Americans, when I talked about slavery or mentioned something about Africa. So yet she persisted because she saw a need to break from what she considered Hollywood's version of Africans, which caused black people to be ashamed of their cultural roots. She used her concerts and stage costumes to make explicit connections between the fight for civil rights and the cultural liberation of African people. So you see, even talking about it, now imagine the hair and the denim, which connect them directly to the roots, became also an ideological revolution, you know. So we have also Angela Davis. She's an extraordinary woman. I strongly recommend you go on YouTube and find her. There's many speeches. She's been all over the world. She's very she's a doctor, she's a scholar, an activist, so her knowledge is just incredible. So she has a very particular story because she was fired from UCLA by Donald Reagan because she belonged to a communist group. She became not only a symbol of her turn to radical politics, but also a radical chic style to be copied. Okay. At that time, when she around the 1970s, I believe, she hired bodyguards because she was constantly threatened. So she bought some weapons for the bodyguards to use, and at some point, one of her bodyguards, orchestrated the kidnapping of a judge to release to negotiate the release of the brother of the bodyguard. So when this happened, people died. So it was kidnapping, conspiracy, and murder. And she was charged for all of this. Okay, her only let's say involvement in all of this was that the weapons were hers, but she was not involved in any other way. So she was charged with 3 capital offenses, 3 death penalties, 3 death sentences. She went to, well, first she became a fugitive, so she was put on the 10 most wanted list of the FBI. Can you believe it? And I think she was a fugitive for a couple of months. And during this period, when the police was looking for her, arrests were made all over the place because she used to wear her hair short. So police started to arrest men and women just because they had their hair short. It was like in the chase, they didn't care. They just arrested people and harassed people all over the place until they found her. So she thought that this was caused by the mainstream media, of course, and the how they portrayed her, right? So she thought that the mainstream media's negative representation of Afro-coiffed black women had serious consequences, even for those who had no affiliation in the Black Power movement. So finally, this incarceration caused a lot of international attention, and she was a black woman. Just imagine at that time, with 3 death sentences, a woman and a black woman. It was a terrible situation. It was almost a hopeless situation. Many people got involved, but Aretha Franklin, which is the Queen of Soul, she was called the Queen of Soul, also a long-time warrior in the fight for social justice. She wrote that she was going to pay for her bail. At that time, Aretha Franklin was in the Bahamas, so there was not going to be time or the means for her to get the money in time to get her out. Even because there was no bail yet. She was, charged with 3 capital offenses. There was no bail at that time for that. So even if there was a bail, the money was not going to get on time to where it needed to be. But she wrote, my daddy says I don't know what I'm doing. Well, I respect him, of course, but I am going to stick to my beliefs. This is Aretha Franklin, okay? Angela Davis must go free. Black people will be free. I've been locked up for disturbing the peace in Detroit, and I know you got to disturb the peace when you can't get no peace. Jail is hell to be in. I'm going to see her free if there is any justice in our courts. Not because I believe in communism, but because she's a black woman and she wants freedom for black people. I have the money, I got it from black people. They made me financially able to have it, and I want to use it in ways that will help other people. So I'm gonna end here The book I want to recommend you is called Liberated Threads, which is from where I got many of this information. I strongly recommend you use it. Next show, we're going to speak about the other half of the book. Believe it or not, this is just probably like 40% of it. So thank you for being with me. Oh, I'm going to show you some pictures. Wait. So as we see, women are protesting wearing more comfortable clothes. Their hair is short now. You see, their hair natural. It is hard to think that you were not even able to wear your hair natural at that time. But revolution came and they started doing it. And it became a trend. This is the poster that the FBI published from Angela Davis when she was a fugitive. Time magazine. Again, I strongly recommend you search about her. She's unbelievably strong. This is Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul, that wanted to bail out Angela Davis. The Grandassa models, this is a movement they were pushing. Black is beautiful. And in all of these album covers, these are Grandassa models sporting their hair short and natural. Their full figures, elegant, well-educated, fashionable. These are Grandassa models with their, look at the prints, beautiful. All of them wearing their hairs natural. And this is a picture of, look, see the dresses, how they were more elegant, the totes, the belts, the pumps. This changed after, again, police brutality started attacking them. See the boy with his hat protesting. These are scenes of how they were hosed down. Look at all the people on the floor. That's one of the methods they used to end the protests at that time. I'm not sure that has changed that much. So yeah, people used to protest in different ways. So thank you so much for being with me. Next time I will speak about more modern times in terms of fashion and the civil rights movement. I will see you soon, okay? Thank you.